as you're tasting the wine, breathe in and out with your nose when you sip it, and then breathe back out your nose, and it will push the aroma through your nasal cavity, and you'll be able to get a whole different complexity of the aroma.
And you've heated the wine up once you swallow it and breathe back out through your nose. So you're going to get a stronger sense of the wine because it's warmer. And also, we have different olfactory bulbs that are at the back of our nasal cavity than we do as we're drinking it. That's a great tip. Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 199. Are you drinking your wine at the wrong temperature? Which wine gadgets will help you explore new wines without overindulging? And why should you breathe out through your nose after sipping wine? You'll hear those tips and stories in part 2 of my chat with sisters Sandy Dawkins and Michelle Lester, who co-host the podcast Wines to Find. You don't need to have listened to part 1 from last week, but I hope you'll go back if you missed it after you finish this one. Now, on a personal note, before we dive into the show with the continuing story of publishing my new wine memoir, Wine Witch on Fire, Rising from the Ashes of Divorce, Defamation, and Drinking Too Much. So last week I shared 2 concepts with you for the new book cover, and now I'll let you know which one we went with and why. Hands down, it's the glass down version for me. But also for 96% of my beta readers, I conducted an informal survey. And by the way, if you missed last week or you didn't get a chance to look at the covers, they'll be in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/199. So here are our collected thoughts on the 2 concepts. This memoir is markedly different in tone, content, and approach from my first 2 books. It's far more personal and in parts more serious. So the glass down cover communicates this, and that it's not the 3rd book in a series of 3. Otherwise, we risk past readers being unprepared for the material. That said, my name is at the top of this cover, which provides some continuity for those who are looking for my next book. The glass up cover concept to us felt busy, crowded, cartoonish, not serious enough, wishy-washy, dated, and as though it's yelling in all caps, even though no one element or word stands out. The illustration competes with the text. Whereas the glass down version has more white space, it's cleaner, more modern and sophisticated. The double I using the wine stem is, I thought, really creative, as is the flaming dot over the I in the word fire. By the way, we adjusted that font so that the word is more clearly fire and not 5, as in, I'll be burning on the 5 p.m. news. Wine Witch on Fire at 5. Join us then. Anyway, those of you who've read it will know what I'm referring to. Readers described this concept with words like fierce, edgy, audacious, elegant, creative, surprising, polished, gritty, inventive, and realistic for a real-life story. A few compared it to the cover and movie poster for The Devil Wears Prada, which I thought was really creative, that they saw the similarities. This concept surprises and delights Broca. That's the part of the brain that decides whether the executive brain should pay attention, our frontal cortex. More importantly, readers said that this design would make them stop and pick up the book. It evokes feelings of mystery and intrigue. What's going on here? Symbolically, the glass down captures my life turned upside down, and then, according to my readers, how this book will turn the wine industry upside down with its message. Yay. The fire still burns within, and yet it's finally contained, as though I've had enough of the harassment and the drinking and so on. Now, on a purely scientific basis, The fire under the glass would burn out without oxygen, but hey, we're talking literary symbols here. One of the many reasons I became a writer and not a nuclear physicist. The other reasons being, of course, my grades and aptitude. Anyway, thank you for all your comments. This book is starting to feel more real than ever with this cover. I've posted a link to a blog post called Diary of a Book Launch in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/199. This is also where I share more behind-the-scenes stories about the journey of taking this memoir from idea to publication. If you want a more intimate insider seat beside me on this journey, please let me know you'd like to become a beta reader and get a sneak peek at the manuscript. Email me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. Okay, on with the show. So both of you like to cook. Sandy, what's your favorite dish that you make and maybe a wine to pair with it?
My favorite dish, and I guess it's because of my children, they love a Beaujolais. So I really do that up with a couple different kinds of meats and start off.
What is a Beaujolais, sorry?
Am I saying
Bolognese.
it wrong? Bolognese.
Bolognese.
Spaghetti
Okay,
sauce.
sorry.
Spaghetti
Yes,
sauce.
Spaghetti
gotcha.
sauce. So,
Yeah.
so I make that. This is one of their favorites, but I spice it up. It's not just hamburger meat and some tomato sauce.
She's made it from scratch completely.
Yeah.
before.
So I do, yeah. And then one of my favorite wines is a Pinot Noir. However, that would not stand up. So I love to do a Barolo with it, just so that it's got that heft. It's still light in weight, but it's
Sure.
got those tannins, and I like it. That's what I do.
That sounds great. That big northern Italian wine, Barolo, would be great with, sometimes you get meaty flavors in there. So yeah, I can imagine. And Michelle, do you have a favorite dish? You cook a very different style, don't you?
Well, we like to play around with what we've visited or areas that we want to go to and cook, bring back a bit of our trips, and our experiences. So I've done, one of my favorites that we did was jerk chicken with a Gewürztraminer, because the spice of the jerk chicken and then balanced with the sweet of the grape itself was just a nice balance.
Oh, that's great. That sounds really good. And do you have each of you favorite sort of all-time food and wine pairings? It doesn't have to be one that you actually cooked and made, but just a pairing that was just to die for?
Okay. Can I say mine? Yeah.
You can.
I was shocked with this pairing. I guess it's kind of one of those things that when you start to, now that I know the background, it's like, oh, it makes sense why it works. French fries and sparkling wine are one of my very favorites. With the greasiness of the French fry and then the sparkling, it just kind of cleanses the palate and lifts it all up. I just love it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Potato chips also are to die for. With the fat is really,
it is
that's
the fat.
Great with the sparkling, the bubbles. Yeah. Great pairing. And Michelle?
I like a classic, the cabin steak. We like both of them. And there's just so many good cabs out there. It's just a good pairing. You can't go wrong.
Yeah. We may have already covered it, but do you have any weird wine and food pairings that you would challenge listeners to try?
So we did, in our YouTube day, we did an experiment, which is when Sandy discovered the whole sparkling wine. But we did sparkling wines with weird things. So we took and we did French fries. I think it were chili cheese fries.
Yeah, chili cheese fries from, I think, Sonic or something.
Yeah, Doritos and something sweet. But we did it with the different types of sparkling wines.
I think we had Cava and Prosecco, and all those had a little bit different flavor profile.
And the bubbles profile is different for those. So what was interesting was putting the wine with the food and then just seeing how a Prosecco went better with this versus that, and how a certain food can actually be changed by the wine itself, your experience of it. So that was really eye-opening.
What did the Prosecco go with versus the others, the Cava?
We would have to go back and watch the video.
That's okay.
But I remember distinctly, because I think it was like fruity Skittles or something. And one of the wines that we had a fruity element to it. And that paired, it actually enhanced, it was one of those eye-opening things where you go, oh, well, I can see where this pulls that in.
What the big takeaway is what Michelle just said is then you use that knowledge and then say, okay, if this says fruity on the back of the label, then I know that if I'm going to have a fruity dish, this is going to help enhance it.
Right.
Sure, absolutely. And Proseccos, I think, do tend to be a bit fruitier, tasting slightly sweeter than, say, a Cava, which is more earthy and dry. But again, they can all be made in such different styles. So do you each have a place that you really love, your favorite place to enjoy a glass of wine?
I'd have to say mine is out on my back deck right before dinner. May go sit out and have either a glass of what we're having that night or even an aperitif style wine. Just sitting out looking at over the lake is probably one of my favorite places.
Nice.
Maybe it's because I can do it most often. Yeah. So.
And I have a similar setup in my back porch. So, except I don't look at the lake, I look at the pool. And a lot of times it's generally after dinner. So we'll go and take our wine and sit out there and just relax and talk about our day.
Oh, very relaxing. We should taste, speaking of all these wines. So tell us about the wine that you have with you here.
So we did an episode called The Dueling Winemakers, and a friend of ours, Jeff Cohn, who's been on the show multiple times, introduced us to this winemaker. This is Alice. It's Anthony Yount is his name. It's Kinero.
Anthony Yount? Okay.
Yount, Y-O-U-N-T.
Oh, okay.
He actually works for dinner. So this is his side job, but
it's good.
You learn that the guys doing their side jobs and that are actually in the business produce some of the best wine. And in a small batch. And this was named after, he's the namesake of his grandmother. And then he named this wine after his grandmother. His first vintage was in 2008. It's only $30 a bottle. It's a Grenache Blanc.
Grenache Blanc. And sorry, what was the name of the wine? I got the name of the winemaker, but the name of the wine?
Alice.
Okay, and so we'll put that in the show notes too if people are curious about it afterwards. But okay, so Alice, Grenache Blanc. And where is he from, the wine grown?
Paso Robles.
Paso Robles, gotcha. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we like about it is we have found a wine that has a little bit more mouthfeel. We like a wine that can compete with a red. You know, a lot of people, they think they don't like white wine. And really, I just think they haven't had a white wine that made to their tastes. So this it's not oaked at all. It is aged in amphora, terracotta
clay vessels. Yeah.
And then concrete. So it's clean. But what we find is that
it gives that mouthfeel that we particularly enjoy.
So we actually, in that episode, there's a red from each winemaker and a white, and we taste the whites after the reds. Because
why do you do that? Oh, go ahead.
Well, because the winemakers told us to. But what it's
did they have a reason?
Yeah. Because this wine can stand up. It is big and bold, and you don't have to have. All whites aren't the same. And this is a white that if you serve it at the right temperature and allow it to show itself best, is going to have that weight and that mouthfeel and that heft and that complexity that a red, that you anticipate in a red. And so they did that on purpose. They gave us a red, a big, heavy, juicy, alcohol-laden red wine. And then they said, but then try this white. And there you go.
Well, you know, that's interesting because when I used to do bigger wine tastings, I would start with the reds and then go to the whites because I found most of the whites had some degree of acidity that was higher than the reds. And if I started the other way around, my mouth got tired more quickly with all the acidity, and then the reds started tasting flabby. And I found it was easier to go with the reds and then go to even lighter whites as long as they had some good bracing acidity. It almost perked my mouth back up.
It awakened.
Yeah, exactly. So this Grenache Blanc, of course, the original home is the Rhone Valley, where Grenache, both red and white, thrive and produce full-bodied reds and whites, Grenache Blanc being white. But so go ahead and taste, like you've got it in your glass, and let us know what you think of it. I'm going to also open my wine while you're tasting. I've got the Sperling Vineyards from British Columbia, a Pinto Gris. So a fresh white for summer. And I will give this a sniff too. It's nice. So what are you thinking about yours?
I have lots of white flowers. That's one of the favorite aromas and profiles that I get from this. I love having that flower note in my wines, and definitely pear.
The pear is
and this Anthony made this wine specifically for his father because his father said he does not like white wine. So he was on a mission to create a white wine that his father would enjoy. And that's and my husband does not typically like white wine. He loves this white wine. And I think it has to do with that pear flavor. Both Anthony's father enjoys that flavor profile and my husband does too. So just a little side note.
Nice. Well, that's the universal story of trying to please a parent, no matter what you're doing, making wine, having a career, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that backstory. And you've put pears in my mind. I'm getting pears from this Sperling Pinto Gris. This is a lovely wine from British Columbia. It's got some bright acidity, but some like sort of white peach, maybe some pear in it, but it's lovely. So what would you pair with that Grenache Blanc that you have there?
I was sitting here thinking a nice creamy cheese is what I would really need to go with this. As I'm sitting here going, what would I want? A nice creamy cheese, maybe a brie, maybe with some goodies chopped in there, maybe some honey and nuts.
I was even thinking pistachios because that's part of the flavor profile that's in here would complement it very nicely. I would even do a chicken with some lime so that way it really even brightens it all up too. I think it would go nicely with that.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds great. And does this winemaker sell the wine directly from his website? Like, can people have a hope of getting this wine?
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So we looked it up to make sure, and then it's sold out. So because he's a small producer and he is well known and he's been producing, it's very popular. You got to get on the list. You got to get it.
But it's worthwhile getting on the list if you can get on the list or if you could find it. Yeah.
Right. The allocation list. Yeah.
Yeah. It's only $30. So it's a great value.
Terrific. Wow. All right. And that's the one wine you have here today, right? We've covered it. Yes. Yeah. Good. So now you or John, the audio guy, Michelle's husband, was using the Coravin, which is your favorite wine gadget. Do you have it there handy?
I do. Yep.
Okay.
So we Coravin the wine today. It is early in the morning and we didn't want to open a full bottle early in the morning. And we're not guaranteed that we're going to have this particular wine this evening. So Coravin comes in very handy when you're podcasting. So in fact, it's super simple. You just place it there's a needle and it goes into the cork. You do have to use it with a true cork, not a synthetic
cork.
Right.
It will make a very small hole into the cork and it has a gas that you insert here that then the gas, it's like a cartridge that has gas and it actually puts gas into the bottle so that when the oxygen comes out, when the wine comes out, it doesn't allow the wine that's left in the bottle to be oxidized because the gas replaces the space. So it's a very good wine preserver. And actually what it allows us to do personally is we do these 2 wines per episode that we Coravin. And then for tomorrow, in fact, we're having leftover wine night.
Oh,
where we invite people that we know personally to taste and join in the fun of tasting the wines that we've had on the podcast.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. It's a good way to also try more and different wines at the same time, because instead of being committed to finishing that bottle, for dinner that night, you might have a glass of this and a glass of that if they've all been Coravin, if that's a verb. Yeah.
That's cool. we
use it. That's how we say
it. Cool. That's a great gadget. Is there something that either of you believe about wine that some people would strongly disagree with you?
Yes. I thought you were going to ask me about my gadgets.
Sandy has her gadgets.
I have my
too.
gadget.
Oh, you have a different gadget. Oh, two gadgets. What is
I
the
have
other
two
gadget?
gadgets. Okay. This may sound silly, but originally when I first started opening up bottles of wine, I'd use the butterfly wine
I still use
opener.
that.
It never worked for me. It drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So I always heard use the bartender's wine opener, which is just basically the corkscrew, but not this kind because it's only one lever. You have to have the double lever corkscrew so that you can get more leverage and step up. So I like
there's 2 notches on it, right?
There's 2 notches. So I like the double lever corkscrew.
Right, because you dig it in and people, if they can see this on the video if they want the visuals, if they're just listening right now, but it kind of hooked on the lip of the bottle for the lowest down notch.
It up.
And then you keep screwing it in and then you get to the tighter one, which will take it off.
Yeah.
I don't know. That probably sounds very confusing, but anyway, I get it. 2 notches on your corkscrew. Oh, that's very good. All right. Then back to, is there something that you believe about wine that people would disagree with?
Yes. I think the general public really thinks that wine is hoity-toity. The people who enjoy it are hoity-toity, but really it's once we started learning and knowing more of these vintners and farmers, they really are just down to earth, great people who are welcoming you in, who want you to try and love their wine. Just simple as that.
And I find there's such often, I mean, these are generalizations, but still, people who make wine or chefs make food, restaurants, they have this urge to nurture, to take care of you, to see you happy by consuming whatever it is they just made for you. So I really love that aspect of it. They just want to sort of take you in like adopted parents and here, have another glass, or,
You need more of this.
sort of thing.
Try this.
Yeah, exactly.
Very welcoming. And the industry is called hospitality for a reason.
Mhm.
And generally speaking, there's a lot of very hospitable people in the wine world.
And
Very
that
much
is why
so.
we're not writing about plumbing parts or something else. Not that there's anything against plumbing parts, but anyway. Do you remember what your childhood smelled like? Any particular smells?
As soon as I thought of that, it was like chlorine.
Ah, the pool.
For
Was
a
it the pool?
Yeah. Chlorine for the
Okay.
pool. As soon as I saw, I was like, chlorine.
Yeah.
Florida girls.
There you go. And do you have a favorite childhood food that each of you remember? Or maybe it was the same one. Maybe there was a special dish that you'd now pair with wine?
Pizza is mine. It's kind of my comfort. Even whenever I'm sick, I want pizza. I don't know if it has to do with the tomato base, but that's kind of a very much a comfort food for me. And I enjoy pairing it with like a Shiraz or a good Zinfandel. I have even paired it with a Lambrusco, like a sparkling Lambrusco. That's been fun.
Yeah, that sparkling red from Italy. They're very interesting wines.
Yeah.
Any other favorite childhood foods?
I would agree with pizza. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Pizza. Yeah, I would imagine you shared a lot of these experiences together. Do you have a favorite wine book?
Oh, I do.
Okay.
This is the Wine Lover's Cookbook. And the reason why I chose it is because it actually helps you decide how to pair the wine. It has to do with the weight of the dish and then gives you some suggestions. It gives you some core elements to look at and then to bounce off. And for example, if you have a Merlot sauce, then you might consider looking for a right bank Bordeaux to go with that sauce since it's predominantly Merlot.
Right, in the wine blend. Yeah,
The wine
exactly.
blend.
That makes sense.
There's an inside joke that we're over here grinning about.
Is it anything you can share publicly?
Oh, yeah. It's our trick for remembering right bank versus left bank Bordeaux. So right bank is Merlot predominant, generally speaking. So that's because on the right bank in Bordeaux of the river that is there, the Merlot grape is grown on the right side of that river.
Yeah.
So we throw back to the Sideways movie.
Oh, yes.
In which Paul Giamatti is very mad at Merlot and doesn't want Merlot. And he says, no to Merlot. So Merlot makes Paul Giamatti mad, and mad is a red color. So the R for the right bank and the red is our little way of remembering that Merlot is the right bank.
Wow, that's quite a string of associations, but I guess it works.
It's the way the brain works. It's the way this brain works.
Sure. Just go for it. And Michelle, do you have a favorite wine book?
You know, I started out with The Windows of the World.
Yes,
Wine
Kevin
book.
Zraly. Yeah.
Kevin Zraly, and he has many iterations of it, but I do enjoy the way it's broken down. I enjoy the pieces and parts of information, and along the side is like where the gold is, because you're reading, and then there's all these little tips on the side that are just kind of high notes. And I find his approach to wine is enjoyable and interesting, and he comes from the hospitality side. So it's based on a lot of people's opinions and thoughts on wine that he's experienced through the years.
Yeah, it's a great book. Like it reads like a wine course, like a beginner's wine course, but it's practical too. It goes beyond that. But of course, it was also based, he used to be either the wine bar buyer or the head sommelier in the World Trade Towers, because Windows on the World was a restaurant. I dined there, sadly. But yeah, it's an excellent book. And Sandy, that book, The Wine Lover's Cookbook, who's the author on that one?
Sid Goldstein.
Great. Okay.
And he's the sommelier.
Okay, great. We'll put links to both of those books in the show notes.
You know, this book is so old. I found it at a secondhand gifts bookstore. So hopefully I don't know if it's still out there. Amazon probably has so much.
Multiple prints of it.
Yeah,
like Kevin
maybe.
Zraly, he's been through several different editions, and he's updated for trends and stuff too. So
Exactly. And I find like even on, say, Amazon, there'll be used books for sale too. So you can find them online if you don't have a secondhand bookshop close by. Do either of you have either a favorite wine you've received as a gift or advice on what type of wine to give as a gift, especially if you don't know the taste of the recipient?
Michelle.
So my go-to on that would be sparkling or a bubbly, some kind of sparkling wine. And the reason for that is even if sparkling wine isn't, especially if it's somebody that you don't know their taste, it's a versatile and it's going to get used. If it gets thrown into a mimosa, if it gets used as a cocktail ingredient, or if it gets regifted or served at a party, it's just going to be used. And so you're not feeling like you're giving a gift that's just not going to be appreciated.
That's true. The regift value is very important, that people can pass it on slyly if they're not keen on it. But sparkling wine's a great choice. Do you have one, Sandy?
I just really wasn't a gift, but it ended up feeling like a gift. My husband went to go get wine for dinner and he asked what we were having and I forget what even it was. He goes, "What would you like?" I said, "Just pick something." So he goes to the liquor store and he brings back this Pinot Noir. So he knows I like that varietal. He goes, "And I remember you saying Sonoma is a little bit cooler, which is better for the wine grape than Napa Valley." So I deliberately went in looking for a Sonoma. And then this one said a state. And I knew that meant that it was probably all those grapes were located. I was like, "Oh, he's listening to me."
That's great.
So that made me feel good just because he was listening and then he went and used the knowledge to pick out a great wine.
It's good to be heard, especially when your wine choices depend on it. That's great. I love that. So, Michelle, if you could share a bottle of wine with any person outside the wine world, living or dead, who would that be and what would you open?
Well, mine would be Jesus. And
wow.
I wouldn't have to
Let's go right to the top.
Yeah. I wouldn't have to open it because he would just make water into wine.
That's a bit cheap. You're Jesus.
If he's the best winemaker ever, I'm not going to step on that toe.
That's true. No, I'm kidding. What would you ask him?
Oh, gosh. I don't know that I would sit back and listen. I don't know that I would ask. I would want to.
I think I'd ask, am I getting in? Like to heaven. And then I bring wine. No, you can't bribe Jesus. That's going down the wrong path. That's great. And Sandy?
I would want to interview Genghis Khan.
That's the opposite. Yeah.
A little bit. I had read a book on him a few years ago and just how he was able to overtake and make such a huge civilization from that mongrel time. And he ended up, even though the Silk Road had been in play for several hundred years by the time he became in power, he really put it all up under one political avenue, under his reign. And then it developed from there. And what it ended up doing is, as you know, wine went through there, silk went through there, and it ended up spurring all of this, the commerce and the culture. So he kind of, I think, helped really perpetuate that aspect, which now I want to say, okay, did you know, was that your intent of doing that? And then what do you think of the current Silk Road that is taking place now? And do you think it will have that same blossoming effect?
Wow. And what wine would you pour for him? Something strong but bitter? I don't know.
I don't know what
an Amarone.
Soften them up. Yeah, something high alcohol.
That's right.
I don't know. A Zinfandel maybe.
I don't know what wine I would pour.
I like your choices, though. They're interesting people, and that's what it's all about when you're sharing a bottle. So good choices. Very different. If you could put up a billboard in downtown Charleston, is that where you are?
Well, we're outside of Columbia in Lexington, but
okay,
it would be blinking and saying, "Restaurant owners, please serve your red wines chilled."
Okay.
Because I cannot tell you, we live in South Carolina. It's very hot here. And I will get an 80-degree red wine.
Oof.
That's been sitting on the counter for the last however long.
And it just really is off-putting. So that would be my billboard.
Absolutely. And kitchens are so hot. I mean, they deliberately keep them hot so that when a dish is ready, it's not going to chill down as it's waiting for the server to come and take it to the table. So it's just a really hot environment. So if you've got wine anywhere in that kitchen, it's going to heat up. Yeah.
I agree with her billboard 100%. Well, I would just.
But then you may add, and the whites too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Serve wine at room or
yeah.
regular.
Yeah.
Perfect
Well, the
temperature.
perfect temperature, really. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Serve wine
Because
at
whites
the right
are
temperature.
often too cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're coming out of the fridge or whatever. Is there one tip you'd give listeners to take away and try to improve their wine enjoyment or savvy?
So we did for our 100th episode, 100 tips. And so we would encourage everyone to go listen to the 100 tip episode because it's and what
That's
we did
very
was
sly. You can get 100. Come listen.
Self-promotion.
Yeah, but we had some folks give us voice memos and share their tips. And one that really did stick, and we've heard it consistently from a lot of different people in different ways, but it's as you're tasting the wine, breathe in and out with your nose, because there's so much experience that are
you do
tied
it both
together.
ways. When you first drink and then you sip it and then breathe back out your nose, and it will push the aroma through your nasal cavity, and you'll be able to get a whole different, or hopefully a different complexity of the aroma.
Absolutely. And you've heated the wine up, once you swallow it and breathe back out through your nose. So you're going to get a stronger sense of the wine because it's hotter or warmer. And also we have different olfactory bulbs that are at the back of our nasal cavity than we do like as it's, as we're drinking it. So yeah, that's a great tip. Any others? Any other favorites?
When you're eating food, sip the wine, then try the food, then sip the wine again, and hopefully you'll notice a difference. So alternate.
And do food, then wine, and then wine, then food, because that can also, if the food has been the last thing in the mouth and then you taste it, it impacts the blend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I love doing that on a very simple basis, with my online course students. And we'll take like a sip of the wine, a small piece of cheese, and then back to the wine. And it so softens any acidity, or it'll bring out fruitiness. People are amazed. It's like a magic trick, but it's just paying attention and doing that order can really, again, illuminate those differences. So fantastic. So as we wrap up our conversation, which has been amazing, thank you. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention before we ask where we can find you online?
I'm sure there is.
Speechless. This is the first time I've heard you speechless.
Well, I just am thinking we covered so much.
Yeah.
We did. It was great.
Yeah. I would just encourage everyone, I'd go back to that. Wine is for everyone.
And it's fun.
And
don't take it too seriously.
No.
And explore,
take the WTF out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. All right. So you have your podcast. So for anyone listening to this, you can find Wines to Find podcast on any podcatcher or any channel.
Any platform.
I assume.
Right.
Any platform.
Like Apple, Spotify, all those.
All the things, all the places.
All the things, yep.
And to your website?
We actually do have a website. It's winestoffind.com. We are very active on Instagram, which is also Wines to Find.
Wines to Find podcast.
Podcast. And that's up there. We're on Facebook. We don't do a whole lot on Twitter, though. We are there, but not a whole lot.
And you can just Google us and it'll pull up, our website. It'll pull up episodes,
It's usually Wines to Find or Wines to Find podcast on social medias and website.
And you have to pluralize. It is wines to find.
Wines,
not just wine.
Yes, because there's more than one.
That's right.
Ladies, this has been wonderful. Michelle, Sandy, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I really enjoyed your stories and tips. Very useful. So thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Bye for now until we meet again. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Sandy and Michelle. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, I love their tips on drinking wine at the right temperature, as well as breathing out through your nose after you sip for maximum pleasure. 2, they also had some great suggestions for gadgets that can help you explore new wines without overindulging. And 3, I couldn't agree with them more that sparkling wine is the perfect gift wine as well as pairing for fries. In the show notes, you'll find my email contact, the full transcript of my conversation with Sandy and Michelle, links to their podcast and website, and where you can find the live stream video version of these conversations on Facebook and YouTube Live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. You'll also find a link to my free Ultimate Guide to Food and Wine Pairing. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/101. 199. Email me if you have a sip, tip, question, or want to become a beta reader of my new memoir at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. You won't want to miss next week when I chat with Valerie Cathawala, a journalist focused on the wines of Germany, Austria, South Tyrol, and Switzerland, with a particular interest in biodynamics. She co-founded Trink magazine and lives in New York City. In the meantime, if you missed episode 84, go back and take a listen. I chat about the hottest wine trends with Darren Olekshin, and I'll play a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
Natural wine is basically wine in its purest form. They do it as simple as they can. They grow organic grapes or biodynamic grapes. They bring them in. They use natural yeast that's in the air. They don't add any yeast. They don't add any kind of additives or chemicals or anything. They make the wine and they put no sulfur or maybe just a small amount of sulfur in the wine at the end before they cork it. And there it is. It's wine in its purest form. Whereas orange wine is not necessarily natural wine. It's kind of like all champagne is sparkling wine, but all sparkling wine is not champagne. Okay. Orange wine is white wine where they ferment it on the skins. So it sits on the skins for quite a while.
And that's weeks, where it gets its color.
Yeah, and that's where you get the orange color from. And you get tannin, which is something you don't necessarily see very often in white wine.
If you liked this episode, please email or tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the wines and stories we discussed. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a bubbly that's perfect with a big plate of fries. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So subscribe for free now at nataliemaclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.